They say we were the last to join the coalition, the last species in this spiral arm to make contact and still have cities left standing after first contact. Everyone else got assimilated, wiped, or politely annexed. But not us. We laughed in the face of the peace envoys, shot 2 of their floating diplomats when they stepped on sacred soil in New Russia, and gave the rest of the galaxy a middle finger wrapped in a nuclear payload. And yet, they still let us in. Not because they respected us, not because they liked us, because they feared us, even if they didn't admit it then. Even now, most of the other species think we're backward, impulsive, dangerous to ourselves. They don't understand how we survived the way we did, why we are so different. But they started to learn, especially after the Threx incident. And that's what this story is really about. I was the only human on the coalition vessel Vorathan's Glory, a dreadnought-class battleship commanded by High General Sharntak of the Honorix Dominion. 9 feet tall, muscle like steel cord, bones like carbon-fused armor, eyes that could track kinetic rounds mid-flight. The Honorix considered themselves the apex warriors of the galaxy, born for battle, engineered for dominance. Sharntak had never served with a human before, didn't care for us, frankly, but diplomacy required representation, and I was their test case. Gunnery chief, technically, a fancy title to keep me out of the way, down in weapons control with access to nothing but cameras and war logs. I was fine with that. I didn't like sitting up front anyway. That always bothered them. The front of the bridge was where glory sat. Where warriors stood, where leaders barked orders across a holomap soaked in red and blue. But I stayed at the back, quiet, watching, always watching. "You fear the heat of battle, human?" Sharntak asked me once, standing tall like a living monolith beside the command podium. "No," I answered without flinching. "I just don't like looking at targets before they die." He didn't like that. None of them did. Honorix are blunt creatures. They value strength, dominance, challenge. They don't understand subtlety, or restraint, or why someone might want to stay behind the line rather than be seen on it. To them, front row is where the blood is, and they crave blood. But humans, we're built different. You throw us into a war zone, we don't charge like beasts. We calculate, we adapt, we burn everything, and then wonder if we went too far. That's what makes us dangerous. We weren't supposed to engage the Threx, not yet. It was a scouting mission, a flex of strength, not a declaration of war. But Threx ships don't care for posturing. They don't respect anything that bleeds. They hit us first, hit hard. 3 of our escort cruisers were gone in the first salvo. The Glory's shields buckled. Chaos took over the bridge, except for Sharntak, who just stood there, giving orders in that cold growl of his, thinking brute force would carry the day. It wouldn't. "Fall back," I said. Not loud, just enough for him to hear. He ignored me. The Threx didn't. Their main gun cut through space like a scythe. It clipped the forward section of the ship. A second slower, and Sharntak would have been ash. But he lived. Barely. And now, panicking, he barked something none of us expected. "Human, you will take command." I looked at him. His mouth was bleeding, his pride worse. "You sure?" He nodded, grim. For the first time I saw fear in those alien eyes. Not of death, of failure, of not understanding what the hell was happening. So I stood up, walked right past him, and didn't stop at the command podium. No. I went right to the weapons console. My domain. My world. The place they shoved me into so I'd stay quiet. "Seal the forward bridge," I said. "Reroute command to rear station. All crew, brace." And then I did what humans do best. I broke every protocol. I ignored every order. I didn't fight fair. I fought to win. The main bridge lights flickered, as the Threx plasma beam scorched the forward hull. You could smell the burning alloy even back in the rear deck. Sharntak was half slung over the edge of the command podium, a string of thick purple blood sliding down one of his mandible plates. His second-in-command was already dead, vaporized along with the front observation panel. I stepped over a burning console. "Seal it off," I said again, calmer now. No one moved. Honorics don't take orders from humans, not unless protocol demands it, and even then they follow grudgingly. But at that moment, I wasn't a human to them. I was the only thing standing. Sharntak growled through a clenched jaw. "Obey him." The blast doors slammed shut with a deep clunk, cutting off what was left of the forward bridge. The lights stabilized. Emergency power rerouted to the rear command deck. Smoke curled through the ventilation system like the scent of cooked failure. Half the crew was still in shock. The other half didn't know whether to obey me or shoot me. I didn't care. I accessed the ship's targeting grid, fingers flying across the hollow interface. The layout was slow. Too slow. The coalition ships relied on calculated targeting, predictive matrices, and diplomatic combat protocols, rules of engagement. Those rules were meant to preserve structure, hierarchy, and give your enemy a way out. Humans didn't do that. We never gave enemies an exit. We didn't fight. We ended things. "Deactivate autolock systems," I said. A silence dropped over the bridge. "Excuse me?" one of the Honorix tech officers asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "You heard me. Manual targeting. I'll take over." "That violates everything," I cut him off. "Yeah, it does. That's the point." He hesitated, then looked at Sharntak, who gave the smallest blood-soaked nod. I took a deep breath. This was it. The part they never let humans touch, the part they feared we might use too well. I plugged into the control neural link. The interface adapted to my mind with a surge of cold static. The weapon systems came alive, not like how they do for the Honorix. For them, it's data. For me, it was intuition. I could feel the heat of the rail cannons, the cold hum of the torpedo bays, the trembling eagerness of the underused flak cores. I'd been studying this ship for weeks from the back, watching everything, tracking every weakness, memorizing its limits. Now I'd push them. "Divert auxiliary power to weapons. You'll overheat the—" "I know, do it anyway." The Threx flagship loomed ahead, massive, beetle-like, its shell glowing with dark energy. Two smaller cruisers flanked it. Hammering the Vorathan's glory with coordinated attacks meant to wear down shields and break formation. That was coalition doctrine. Precision, strategy, discipline. Human doctrine was simpler: rage, misdirection, and pain. I fired the port side flak cannons, not at the ships, but at open space between them. The detonation lit up like a false explosion. Pure distraction. One Threx cruiser adjusted course automatically, avoiding what it thought was a blast zone. That's when I hit it. Not with plasma, with a full torpedo volley, straight through its side thrusters. The ship spun violently, engines misfiring, its starboard was exposed. I followed up with a pulse beam, not aimed at the hull, but the comm relay. "Blind them," I muttered. The beam struck true. The cruiser's coordination snapped. It floated off course, a blind predator spinning in its own blood. The bridge was quiet now. Too quiet. The Honorix crew didn't know whether to cheer or brace for whatever I'd do next. "I'm opening comms with the Threx," I said. Gasps. Sharntak snarled, forcing himself to stand despite the injury. "You intend to negotiate?" I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with him. "No. I want them to see my face when I erase them." The Threx commander appeared on the screen, A mound of armor, spines, and those disgusting reflective eyes, pitch black with no soul. Their voice was a static smeared clicking hiss, almost insectile. Translated, it meant, "You adapt like disease." "Thanks," I said. "Now let me show you what happens when the infection spreads." I cut the feed and fired every main gun at once. No warning, no coordination. No declarations of war or noble speeches, just the raw, brutal force of a species that learned to turn pain into weaponry. The dreadnought shuddered as the recoil blasted out. The forward thrusters kicked in. The ship lunged, cannons roaring, flak tearing through space, rail slugs penetrating shields designed to withstand precision, not rage. The Threx flagship returned fire, but it was too late. We weren't fighting like a coalition vessel. We were fighting like cornered wolves, like apes with knives, fire, and something to prove. They didn't expect it. They never do. The second cruiser tried to flank us. I'd anticipated that. I had already rotated the dorsal turrets independently, bypassing coalition safety locks that required chain-of-command confirmations. 1 round. That's all it took. Right through its main energy core. Boom. Gone. Bridge crew started shouting now, not in protest, but awe. One Honorix warrior slammed his fist against his chest plate, a gesture of submission or maybe respect. I didn't care. My brain was still linked to the weapons. The adrenaline was too thick. I was back in the state I'd lived through in the Europa Civil Purge. Fight or die, burn or be buried. The flagship was limping now, but not dead. It fired a last desperate plasma lance, a massive stream of energy meant to cut through us like butter. I didn't dodge. I braced. Let it hit. The shields collapsed. The hull split open in 4 places. Crew screamed. Fire erupted behind me, but I'd already rerouted auxiliary power to the plasma capacitors. The overload was building. One final shot. I targeted its throat, the central hangar where all its fighters were stored. And I emptied the capacitor. The shot went straight through. A delayed boom, then another. Then the entire ship cracked open like a rotting fruit. Silence followed. On the bridge, I pulled the neural link from my temple, blood running from my nose. The crew stood still. Charntak was on his knees, not from injury, but from something else. Disbelief. Maybe humility. "We've won," one of the officers whispered. I didn't respond. I just sat back down. At the rear, where humans belong. They never understood before. Why we sit in the back. Why we let others take the front seats, the spotlight, the glory. It's not fear, it's calculation. We sit in the back so when everything falls apart, when the great warriors fail and the noble empires crumble, when the monsters from deep space start to chew on bones they didn't think would bite back, we're still standing, still watching, and ready to burn the whole damn galaxy if we have to. After the battle, the glory drifted silently for a full cycle. No one spoke to me, not right away. They were processing, recalibrating everything they thought they knew about my species. Humans weren't diplomats. We weren't warriors in the traditional sense. We were something older, dirtier, built from betrayal, war, and too much history written in blood. The medics tried to sedate me. I refused. Charntak approached, bandaged and limping, and for the first time in his career he bowed his head. "I underestimated your people," he said. "Everyone does," I replied. He nodded, then asked something I never thought I'd hear from his kind. "Why did you not take the front before?" I leaned back in my chair, looked around at the battered bridge, at the blood, at the burn marks on the floor, the silence of near death still hanging in the air. "Because the front is for leaders," I said, "and humans, we don't lead until we're forced to." He stared. I continued. "But once we do, we don't stop." That day, the galaxy didn't just see what humans can do. They learned why we don't do it often. Because when we do, we don't leave survivors. The aftermath of the Threx engagement didn't feel like victory. It felt like aftermath always does. Quiet, too quiet. Like something was missing. Like something had been broken, and no one had the guts to admit what it was. 3 hours passed. The emergency systems held. The dead were being scraped off bulkheads. Fires were mostly out. But the smell of burning insulation, coolant, and blood lingered like it had a place here. I sat in the rear still, stripped out of my neural gear, drinking something the Onorix called clarity serum, which tasted like melted plastic and regret. They kept looking at me now, not with hate, not with respect either. Fear, the cold kind. Onorix warriors were trained not to fear anything that bled, but they'd seen something they didn't understand. Not rage, not strength. It was restraint, the kind that waits, the kind that hides behind smiles and silence until it explodes in your face with no warning and no mercy. No one said it out loud, but the command hierarchy was broken. Not officially, of course. The Coalition would never acknowledge that a human had taken battlefield command and wiped out a Threx task force without clearance. That kind of record gets sealed so fast it might as well never have happened. But it did happen. And I saw the shift, not just in the crew, in Jarntak himself. He wasn't limping anymore. His wounds had been patched with Onorix nanogel, and they worked fast. But he hadn't returned to the front podium. He stayed back here, with me. Not quite at my side, but not ahead of me either. That was new. He cleared his throat. That deep, gravelly rumble like a rock slide under pressure. You disobeyed every doctrine the Coalition mandates for engagement. Yep, I said. You risked structural collapse by rerouting capacitor power through broken lines. Also true. You used weapons designated for orbital bombardment on live targets in open space, with no line-of-sight confirmation, no authorization codes, and no fail-safes. I did. A pause. It was effective. I turned my head and looked him square in the eye. That's the problem, isn't it? He didn't respond, just folded those massive arms and looked away. See, they don't know what to do with us. That's the whole thing. Humans are the wrench in the machine. They bring us in for diversity, for unpredictability. They praise our adaptability and our instinct. But they only want it when it doesn't threaten them. They want a tame human, a mascot, someone to say something clever and wear the patch with pride. They don't want someone who wins differently. I stood up and stretched. My shoulders cracked from the tension. I hadn't even realized I'd clenched my fists for the past hour. I needed sleep. Real sleep. Not the kind you take with one eye open and your hand wrapped around a sidearm. I made it 2 steps before the sirens started again. Not Threx this time. Internal alert. I froze. Exarntak looked up. What is it? Not an attack, I said slowly. That's security breach protocol. I tapped into the wall console and pulled up ship schematics. Rear storage bay. Breached. Not from the outside, from within. That's when I knew. They weren't just afraid of me. They were planning to remove me. 10 minutes later, I was walking the lower halls with 2 Onorix guards behind me. Supposedly an escort, more likely to make sure I didn't disappear into the armory or blow a hole through the command deck. The air felt thicker down here, heavier, the kind of atmosphere that comes before bad decisions. We reached the rear cargo bay and found it already sealed. Not damaged, locked. Military override code. Jarntak arrived a few moments after, dragging his war coat over his shoulders like he was dressing for a funeral. You know what this is? I asked him. He didn't reply. That was confirmation. I turned to the sealed door. Open it. He hesitated, then gave a nod to one of his lieutenants. The door hissed open, and there they were. 3 figures, all Honorics, not regular soldiers, internal oversight, coalition compliance officers. That explained everything. They didn't trust me to leave the ship alive. This wasn't about protocol anymore. This was about containment, about making sure that what happened didn't happen again. One of them stepped forward. Sleeker armor, blue trim, symbol of the Galactic Tribunal on the chest. He didn't introduce himself, just spoke with that sterile, dead tone they all had. Human operative. You are hereby placed under provisional quarantine per Article 975, subsection D, regarding unauthorized assumption of coalition battlefield authority. Provisional quarantine, I repeated. Cute way of saying prison. Pending review, your access to command systems is revoked. Your identity tag is suspended. You will remain aboard until proper debrief. You mean interrogation? The officer tilted his head slightly. No emotion, no pushback, just efficiency. You endangered this vessel by exceeding behavioral tolerances permitted to your species, he continued. Your actions, while tactically effective, have triggered multiple cross-species panic indicators. You are considered unstable. I laughed, right in his face. Unstable? I said. I saved your God's damned flagship. I turned a massacre into a miracle. And you think I'm the threat? You are the threat, he said coldly. He wasn't wrong. That's what made it sting. They didn't want humans to save the day. They wanted us to play nice, to lose quietly, to prove we could be trusted in a cage. I stepped forward. One of the guards raised a stun pike. Sharntak didn't stop me. Let me make something clear, I said, voice low, slow, and sharp enough to bleed. You people dragged my species into your little galactic playground and expected us to clap when you handed us scraps. You didn't study us. You studied our art, our diplomacy, our fake smiles. But you never read our history. The officer narrowed his eyes. We reviewed. No, I cut him off. You skimmed it. You thought Hiroshima was an accident. You thought trench warfare was a mistake. You thought World War was something we'd outgrown. I leaned closer. You have no fucking idea what kind of monsters we used to be. Still are. Silence. Then Sharntak did something no one expected. He stepped forward and stood beside me. I authorized his actions, he said. The officer blinked. That's not possible. You were injured. I gave command to the human. That makes the human's decisions an extension of my authority. If he's guilty, so am I. The compliance officers exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for this. Sharntak's name carried weight. He wasn't just a commander. He was a war-bred noble. If he took the fall, questions would rise, ugly ones, too visible, too political. Your objection is noted, the officer said carefully. We will resume this conversation at Central Tribunal. In the meantime, both of you are confined to non-command quarters. He turned and left with his goons. Cowards. As the door sealed, I exhaled slow and deep. Sharntak looked at me. That was foolish. Yeah, I said. But it worked. We walked back toward the lift in silence. He said nothing, but his stride had changed. Not stiff like before, not commanding, something more grounded, like respect, real respect. You were right, he finally said. About? Sitting in the back. I gave a tired smile. We only sit there so you forget we're here, I said. Until you need us. And now? I stopped walking. Now you've got 2 choices, I told him. Either you let them bury me, or you start asking why the hell your most powerful enemies are scared of a species that hasn't even colonized Mars properly. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. We weren't supposed to survive this far. Not humans. Not with our fractured history, our self-destructive politics, our obsession with war and power. We were supposed to kill ourselves off before we ever reached the stars. But we didn't. We dragged ourselves through hell and still had enough left in the tank to make the galaxy nervous. That's why they hate us. Because deep down, they know if the galaxy ever does fall apart, the ones who sat in the back will be the ones still standing in the ashes. The non-command quarters were barely more than glorified holding cells. They weren't called that, of course. That would have violated some coalition treaty about interspecies dignity. But the door only opened from the outside. The air recycler whined every 2 hours. And the cot had the charm of a coffin with fabric. I'd been in worse. On Europa, I once slept inside the broken husk of a drop pod for 3 nights, while artillery fire flattened everything around me. The walls were thin, my sidearm was empty, and the only thing that kept me sane was listening to the enemy scream when one of ours got through. Compared to that, this place was a spa. Still, I knew what it meant. This wasn't just disciplinary hold. This was optics, a way for the coalition to say, "See, we're handling it. The humans under control." They wanted to file this entire thing away under incident, make it a footnote in a report, bury it deep, somewhere no one would dig. They didn't realize something. Humans are the worst species to try and bury, because we don't stay dead. The door hissed open without warning. No guard. Just one of the Honorix officers I hadn't bothered to memorize. Young, tall, clean, which meant he hadn't seen real war yet. His armor was ceremonial, barely scratched. He stepped inside, trying not to make eye contact. "You're to report to Interrogation Chamber 3. "Is it an actual interrogation?" I asked, standing, "or are they calling it something else now?" He didn't answer. Just gestured. Sharntak wasn't in his quarters. They'd separated us overnight. Smart move from their side. Dangerous one, too. Separating humans from their allies tends to backfire. They walked me through the halls like a rabid animal. 2 guards in front, 2 behind. No conversation, no questions, just the rhythm of boots on alloy and the distant hum of ship systems still recovering from the Threx engagement. We passed crew in the corridors. Honorix, Vikorth, even a few Tsali engineers. All of them stopped what they were doing to watch me walk by. No one spoke. No one saluted. Just eyes. Judging. Fearing. I'd seen that look before. Same look I got after the siege on the Helix moon. Same one after the Sargon Rebellion. It's the look you get when you walk out of something no one thought you should have survived. And you're not smiling about it. The interrogation room was colder than the rest of the ship. Probably intentional. Psychological trick. Try to disarm the subject. Keep them physically uncomfortable so they crack emotionally. Amateurs. I sat. No restraints. Another trick. Make me think they trust me, or make me wonder why they don't need to restrain me. Across the table, 3 beings waited. Only one of them was Honorix, an old general named Kerntal, with dull green plating and a left eye replaced with some kind of mechanical implant. The other 2 were coalition, high tier. One Sali, skin translucent and pulsing with internal light, a species that spoke mostly through tone rather than words. The other, a surprise, human. I stared at him for a long moment. He looked comfortable here. Pressed uniform, coalition badge, a tired smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Too clean, too careful. Government man. "You're a long way from Earth," I said. He nodded once. "Commander Reese Calden, EarthGov liaison to Coalition Military Affairs." "Liaison?" I repeated. "Nice word for handler." "We're not here to handle you." "No?" I glanced at the Honorix guard near the door. "Could have fooled me?" He folded his hands, calm and diplomatic. "Let's start with this. Do you know why you're here?" "Because I made you all look weak." That wiped the smile off his face. The Tsali leaned forward, its voice a soft chime that echoed in the room unnaturally. You violated engagement protocols. You disregarded command structure. You utilized weapon systems outside your species' clearance rating. And you engaged an enemy with non-sanctioned tactics in a theater that was under observation. I saved the ship. You made a spectacle, Calden said, sharper this time. A human spectacle, and now half the coalition is asking questions Earth isn't ready to answer. I looked him in the eye. What questions? He hesitated. That told me everything. I leaned forward. Let me guess. Why does a species that should have died off a dozen times keep surviving? Why do we fight dirty? Why do we win fights we're supposed to lose? Why do we scare enemies that don't even breathe the same air as us? Kern Tal, the Honorix general, finally spoke. His voice was slower, deeper, like gravel pushed through oil. They fear your nature. Good. He stared at me with a face carved from steel. Not good, he said. Dangerous. I didn't ask to be dangerous. No, he agreed. But you are. And now the question is whether we can afford to let your kind keep sitting in the back. I didn't answer. Because I knew what this really was. Not an interrogation. A test. They wanted to know if I'd apologize, show remorse, give them something they could put in a report to prove humans could be reined in. Instead, I stood. If you're waiting for me to say I'm sorry for winning a war your way didn't work in, you'll be here a long damn time. The Tsali pulsed with soft orange light. Alarm. Discomfort. Calden raised a hand, diplomatic again. This isn't about punishment, it's about understanding. We don't want to suppress human capability. We want to guide it, help integrate it into the coalition. You want to domesticate it, I said. Silence. I took a breath. Let it out slow. You ever wonder why we sit in the back? Calden said nothing. We sit in the back because we see more. Because we don't want to lead. Not unless we have to. Because when we lead, we don't stop. You think you're scared of us now? I leaned closer. Try putting a human in charge of a fleet. Kerntal's eye whirred softly. Calden finally spoke again. Then give us something. Help us understand what you are. I gave him exactly one word. Survivors. He blinked. We're the ones who crawled out of nuclear ash and kept building. We're the ones who turned killing each other into sport, into art, into history lessons. We're the ones who lose and lose and lose, and then get up anyway. You don't get to understand us, because if you did, you'd start building ships like ours. I turned for the door. They didn't stop me, because deep down, they knew I was right. Back in my quarters, the air felt heavier, more loaded. The guards were gone. The door wasn't locked. That wasn't mercy. That was politics. They'd decided to keep me visible. Let me walk the ship again. Let the other species see that I wasn't a monster, just a warning. Sharntak came in without knocking. I didn't even look up. Good speech, he said. Didn't make it for them. He sat across from me, quiet for a moment. Then, they won't trust you again. They never did. He gave a slow nod. Then, more softly, I would follow you in battle. I looked at him then, really looked. You're not supposed to say that? I don't care. That was the first honest thing I'd heard since the Threx, and it made me more nervous than all the interrogations combined. Because if the strongest warriors in the galaxy start siding with the species that was never supposed to survive, then the balance of power is already shifting, and the galaxy's not ready. You could feel it in the halls now. The tension. It wasn't the kind of tension you get after a lost battle, or even the usual tightrope of command hierarchy. This was deeper, unspoken, like the ship had suddenly divided into parts that didn't know if they were on the same side anymore. And it wasn't just about me. It was about what I represented. I didn't hold rank anymore, not officially. After the interrogation, they never gave a verdict, just silence. My clearance was under review, which meant revoked. My name was probably being dragged through more committees than I could count. But they didn't isolate me either. That was the mistake. They left me walking the ship, visible. The Honorix crew were split. Some avoided eye contact entirely now. Others stared too long. 2 even nodded at me once in the mess hall, not out of politeness, but acknowledgement, the kind warriors give each other. That was the first sign something was changing. The second came 2 days later. It was 400 standard, and I was walking the lower engineering corridor, not because I had orders, but because I couldn't sleep. You don't sleep well when you know the people who gave you a uniform are debating whether you're worth keeping around. I passed a small utility chamber with the door slightly open. Inside, voices. Low. Heated. I leaned in just enough to listen. I'm telling you, the human didn't disobey. He adapted. There's a difference. Irrelevant. Coalition Command dictates engagement protocols for all species. You weren't on that bridge. You didn't see what he did. I read the logs. The logs are clear. He bypassed 3 safety layers and took control of a dreadnought's primary firing systems without authorization. He saved the ship. His victory undermines our doctrine. If we let humans start deciding when the rules matter, they'll never follow them again. Maybe they shouldn't. Silence. I pulled back. That last voice. It was Honorix. And it didn't sound uncertain. It sounded like a decision being made. It wasn't the only one. By the end of the week, the Vorathon's Glory had docked with Coalition Central Station Theta 7, a massive orbital station that hung like a parasite above the gas giant Tai Valus. The station was known for its political neutrality, serving as a meeting point for Coalition factions that couldn't agree on much, except the need to keep things stable. Stability was a myth. It always is. The real reason we docked was because there was a meeting. A quiet one. No headlines, no declarations, just a private session of the Coalition's inner chamber. Normally, humans weren't even in that room. I got invited. More accurately, I was summoned. The chamber itself looked like something out of a simulation. Massive circular table. Holographic projectors suspended mid-air, and security so tight I counted 5 different biometric scans just to enter. There were 12 seats around the table. Only one was human. Calden was already seated when I arrived. Same polite smile, same carefully measured posture. A handler in every sense of the word, but now his leash was too short to keep me quiet. The others trickled in. The Vikorth ambassador, tall and eyeless, slid into place like a shadow. The Tsali representative flickered with emotional light in her chest cavity. Anxiety, mostly. A Krenari admiral sat near the far end, claws tapping on the table with restless irritation. And the Honorix? 2 of them. One was Kurn Tal, the general from the interrogation. The other was Harntak. He was not supposed to be here. Yet there he was, armor polished, insignia bright, face calm, and no one challenged him. That said everything. Calden leaned toward me slightly. Don't speak unless spoken to. I didn't respond, but I knew he could feel the tension in my jaw. The meeting began, and from the very first sentence, it became clear. This wasn't about whether I broke rules. This was about whether humanity belonged in the same galaxy as everyone else. The human's actions represent a deviation from expected behavior, the Tsali said, voice like chiming crystal. While tactically successful, the methodology introduces instability into coalition engagements. Instability? Kerntal rumbled. Or unpredictability? Unpredictability is instability, the Vikorth intoned, every word sliding like oil through water. We cannot base a galactic defense strategy on chaos. Then perhaps we've grown too predictable, Sharntak said, voice quiet but sharp. The Threx knew our responses before we gave them. They planned for them. The only thing they didn't plan for was the human. All eyes turned to him. He met their gazes without flinching. The human did not win because of strength, he continued. He won because he refused to play by the same rules the Threx had already studied. Kalden cleared his throat. And if we encourage that mindset, what do you think happens the next time a human doesn't like their orders? Sharntak turned to me then. Let's ask him. I felt Kalden stiffen beside me. His body didn't move, but the panic in his eyes flashed like a flare. I stood slowly. No one stopped me. So I walked to the center of the chamber and looked around at the species who thought they ran the galaxy. Let me ask you a question, I said, slow and steady. When was the last time your enemies feared you? Silence. When was the last time your fleets moved through contested space and nothing fired at them? Not because of treaties, not because of bureaucracy, but because the people on the other side didn't want to find out what would happen if they did. I scanned the room. You've been at peace too long. You've forgotten what war really is, what it does to people. Humans didn't forget. We never had the luxury. The Krenari admiral sneered. And that justifies violating protocol? No, I said. It explains why protocol failed. Another pause. Then the Tsali glowed red. This is the danger. The human glorifies violence. I shook my head. No, I remember it. I turned back to the table. You brought us into the coalition to show progress, to prove the galaxy was unified, but you didn't bring us in because you needed us. You did it for optics. I looked at Kalden. And that's the problem. He said nothing. Because now you do need us, and you don't know how to deal with that. I stepped back. Let the silence do the rest. After the meeting, I wasn't escorted back to my quarters. No guards, no leash, no handler, just Sharntak, waiting in the hallway like he'd known how it would go. They're afraid, he said. They should be, he grunted. Some want to use you, others want to eliminate you. And you? He stared at me for a long time. I want to survive the next war. That was as honest an answer as any. We walked together in silence for a while. Two soldiers, one human, one alien, both aware that something had cracked that wouldn't be sealed again. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about us. Earth, humanity, the backseat species, the ghost at the table. Now we were visible. And they didn't know whether to salute us or shoot us. The first attempt wasn't subtle. I was alone, returning to my temporary quarters on Station Theta 7. No guards, no handler, no oversight, just cold steel walls, humming conduits, and the faint scent of something sharp in the air, like scorched ozone. I noticed the flicker in the hallway light first. Most people wouldn't, but humans, we adapt to little things. It's not just instinct, it's trauma. Trauma teaches you to notice everything, especially when something doesn't fit. The flicker repeated, in rhythm, too steady to be mechanical failure, not random. A signal. Someone had looped the hallway feed, which meant whoever was coming didn't want it recorded. I stepped into the corridor, slow, quiet, bootsteps soft against metal. I counted 2 ventilation nodes, 1 door left, 2 to the right. Nowhere to run. But I wasn't running anyway. The door to my quarters was slightly ajar. That was mistake number 2. I never leave doors open. I stopped just short of it. Listened. No breathing, no movement. That's what told me someone was definitely inside. Only 2 kinds of people are that quiet. Snipers and killers. I let out a slow breath and pulled the small alloy panel from the side of the wall. Inside was the emergency gas release valve. Coalition standard, mostly harmless, unless you'd rewired it like I had. One flick. Then I waited. 3, 2, 1. Hiss. The panel inside my quarters burst in a flash of white smoke, disorienting compound, harmless to humans, but it triggers panic and blurred vision in most non-oxygen breathers. The Onorix learned the hard way during joint combat training on Denkar 9. A shape stumbled out of my quarters, gagging. Tall, armored, definitely not Onorix. Sleeker frame, lighter plating. Zari, Coalition Spec Ops. I didn't hesitate. One step forward, pivot, elbow to the throat, knee to the inner leg joint. I slammed him into the wall so hard it cracked. He tried to stab me with something needle-thin. Looked like a bone scalpel. Too slow. I caught his wrist, twisted, and broke it. He didn't scream. Disciplined. But he did drop. I dragged him into my room, stripped his helmet off. Pale skin, covered in faint luminescent veins. Zari. No doubt. No rank insignia, no unit patch, just clean armor and a kill kit. He wasn't here to intimidate. He was here to erase me. No arrest, no trial, just silence. He was still coughing when I crouched next to him. "Who sent you?" He said nothing. I pressed his own blade against the soft joint behind his jaw. "You think I'm scared to kill you?" I asked softly. "After everything? After Europa, after Helix Moon, after the Threx?" His eyes flinched. He knew what I'd done there. They all did. I didn't kill him. I knocked him out cold, left him tied in the wall panel behind the vent. I knew the internal patrol would find him within 30 minutes. That wasn't the point. The point was that someone, somewhere inside the Coalition, had decided the human problem couldn't be solved with politics anymore. They wanted it buried. Sharntak wasn't surprised when I told him. He stood in the observation deck, arms folded, watching the endless swirl of Tyvalis' storm bands below us. The gas giant looked peaceful from up here, like a sleeping god. But peace was always a lie. "They won't stop," I said. "No," he agreed, "but they won't be so clumsy next time." That was the terrifying part. They didn't care if they got caught, because the punishment would be minimal. The sorry spec ops guy would vanish. No official file, no record. Just a malfunction or a training accident. The Coalition had learned something about humans. But so had I. They didn't need all of humanity gone. Just the ones who refused to behave. "You realize what this means?" I said. Sharntak nodded. "It means they don't think they can control you. Or your kind. That was always the case. But now," he said, turning to me, "they're afraid you know it." I stared out the viewport. "We need to leave this station." He frowned. "You think they'll try again?" "I know they will." I turned toward him. "And next time they won't send one." The plan wasn't complicated. Complicated gets people killed. We'd leave during shift rotation. Docking Bay 6, back hangar, small diplomatic shuttle, nothing that would trip defense scans. Sharntak pulled his rank strings, and I faked a medical emergency tied to cognitive overload, which was their way of saying, he might be mentally unstable, but we won't admit it publicly. The irony made me grin. We moved quietly. No weapons, no armor, just two soldiers, walking like they weren't already labeled as threats. We didn't make it to Dock 6. Not directly. Halfway there, the alarms sounded. Sector lockdown. My blood froze. They knew. How? Then I saw her. Kilden's assistant, a human, I should have known. She'd smiled too much, asked too few questions, always stood 3 steps behind him like she was harmless. But her eyes were wrong. Too calm. She was watching me from across the corridor now, pretending to speak into a comm panel. But I saw it. The flick of her wrist, the way she tilted her head, a signal. She'd triggered the lockdown. I nodded once. "Change of route," I said to Charntak. He didn't argue, didn't ask. We ducked into a maintenance shaft and began the crawl, silent, claustrophobic. The shaft was barely wide enough for him. I led the way. Every few meters, I tapped the wall for vibration feedback. Nothing yet. Then I heard it. Clanking. Above us. Fast. "Synchronized security drones, 3 of them," I turned to Harntak. "Go quiet." We stopped breathing. The drones passed by, barely 6 feet overhead, then kept going. We moved. Faster now. 2 more corridors, then an emergency lift. I bypassed the lock with a trick I'd learned from a Tsari slicer on Tarka 3. Hotwire the biometric sensor with a thermal pulse and make it read General Override. Door opened. We dropped into the cargo bay, and straight into hell. 6 armed guards, Tsari and Vikorth mix. No insignia. Faces covered. No warning. They opened fire. I dove left. Charntak rolled right. A plasma bolt scorched the floor between us. I grabbed the nearest crate, flipped it for cover, yanked the emergency beacon off the side. "I thought we weren't carrying weapons," Charntak roared. I grinned as I pried open the crate. "Didn't say they weren't." Inside, covert supply shipment from an Honoric skirmish unit, pulse rifles, stun mines, 1 modified thermoblade. I tossed the blade to Charntak. He caught it mid-air, ignited it. The hum was deep and angry. We didn't hold back. I fired twice, dropped the first guard. Charntak charged like a wrecking ball, slicing through another like cloth. A third tried to flank me. I planted a stun mine at his feet and watched him collapse in spasms. They were well trained, but not human trained. Not trauma trained. We cleared the bay in under 40 seconds. Bodies everywhere. The shuttle was still intact. I sprinted to the control panel, punched in the override. The ramp opened. Charntak followed, bloodied but alive. We were off the station in 30 seconds. Clearance codes? Spoofed? Flight path? Dirty? Escort? None. We were a rogue signature now, and as we slipped past the final outer scan radius, I finally exhaled. Charntak slumped into the co-pilot seat. "What now?" he asked. I stared ahead, at the stars, the empty black. "We stop reacting," I said, "and we start planning." He raised a brow. "For what?" I looked at him. "For the moment this entire damn galaxy realizes they can't keep humans in the back anymore." We didn't speak for a while after leaving Theta 7. There's something about escaping death that leaves you quiet. Not from fear. No, that part comes later. But from the realization that the rules you thought you understood no longer exist. I sat in the pilot's chair, staring out at nothing. Just the streaks of hyperspace, moving like threads being pulled tight across the universe. Charntak sat beside me, quiet, wounded, thoughtful. He hadn't asked where we were going, and I hadn't told him. Because the truth was, I didn't know. We weren't running. Not really. Running implies there's someone chasing who can catch you. This was something else. We were exiling ourselves, at least for now. "Do you regret it?" he asked finally. I didn't turn to look at him, just kept my eyes forward. "Which part?" "Taking control of the Vorthan's glory, starting all this." I thought for a moment. Then, "No. I regret not doing it sooner." He didn't speak for a bit. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "My kind has always believed that strength brings peace, that through domination order is born. But I'm starting to think we were wrong." I turned now. That's a lot for an Honorix to admit. He met my gaze, and for the first time since I'd known him, there was uncertainty behind those steel eyes. "Strength without fear is useless," he said, and peace without fear is temporary. That line stayed with me, because he was right. Peace isn't born from treaties or council meetings. Peace is born when the people who might start something don't, because they're afraid of what'll happen if they do. That's what the Coalition feared about humans, not our numbers, not our tech, not even our brutality. They feared that we had nothing left to lose. We docked the shuttle at an Outer Rim refueling station operated by a fringe Onorix clan, one not fully aligned with Coalition doctrine. Sharntak had contacts here, and for once I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. The moment we stepped off the shuttle, I felt eyes on us. 6 Onorix warriors stood at the bay exit, watching us approach like they were deciding whether to salute or shoot. Sharntak nodded once to the one in front, a scarred old warrior named Vorak, missing one mandible and half a shoulder. "You travel with a human," Vorak growled. Sharntak didn't flinch. "I travel with an ally." Vorak looked at me, not with disgust. That would have been easier. No, what I saw in his eyes was worse. Respect. "Then we have much to talk about," Vorak said. "The clans are stirring." That got my attention. We followed him through the station. It wasn't polished like Coalition hubs. This was old metal, dented walls, flickering lights, lived in. You could tell by the wear patterns on the floors where generations had stood, fought, bled. Warriors don't need luxury. They need purpose. And that's what I saw in the faces of every Onorix we passed. Soldiers. But not Coalition ones. These were the old blood. The ones who remembered when the Onorix didn't answer to council votes and diplomatic subcommittees. We entered a central war chamber, circular with elevated seating and a hollow pit in the middle that had clearly seen more than a few arguments settled with fists. A dozen Onorix stood around the room. Vorak raised a hand. "This is the human," he said. "The one who broke the Threx line at Nimari Drift. The one who was targeted by Coalition assassins. The one who defied command and won." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. I didn't speak. Let the silence do its work. "Why have you brought him here?" one of the older warriors asked. Sharntak stepped forward. "Because he's proof that the Coalition no longer values strength, only obedience." That line hit like a hammer. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a stop for fuel. This was a recruitment. The Onorix clans were fracturing, not all of them, but enough. Enough to start questioning the value of a system that tied the hands of warriors and silenced any voice that didn't speak in carefully sanctioned tones. Vorak turned to me. "Human, do you seek war?" "No," I said. "I seek freedom." "Freedom from what?" I met his gaze. "From anyone who thinks they get to decide what humans can or can't be." The room went still. Then Vorak laughed. Not a mocking laugh. A warrior's laugh, deep, approving, filled with a fire that hadn't burned in years. "You speak like an Onorix," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but I fight like a human." That night we were given quarters. Spartan but clean. No guards at the door, no locks. That was a test. You don't put a human in an open room unless you're sure he won't kill you in your sleep. We passed. At least for now. Sharntak sat across from me at the metal table. "There are elements in the Onorix high bloodlines who want out," he said. "They've grown tired of the Coalition's peace, of the way it weakens our kind." "Sounds like rebellion." "No," he said. "Not yet. But if enough clans withdraw, it could become one." I sat back. Thought for a moment. "You want me to help convince them?" "No," he said. "I want you to show them that humans are more than just unpredictable, that you're worthy of alliance." I didn't answer, because he was asking me to do something dangerous, something bigger than fighting a battle. He was asking me to represent my species to the deadliest warriors in the galaxy. Warriors who didn't trust easily, didn't forgive quickly, and who would never forget if I made the wrong move. I stood. "You want a symbol?" I said. "Fine, I'll give them one." He raised a brow. "How?" I looked out the narrow window, at the stars. "At dawn," I said, "you gather the clan leaders in the pit." "Why?" I turned back to him, jaw tight. "Because I'm going to earn their fear." The pit was silent. 10 clan leaders, 200 warriors watching. No fanfare, just one human, standing alone in the middle. I stripped off the coalition badge from my shoulder and threw it into the dirt. Let them see it. Let them know I wasn't hiding behind politics or treaties anymore. "I won't give you speeches," I said, "because warriors don't need words, they need proof." I pointed to the line of Anorix champions lined up along the wall. "Send your best." Vrak laughed again. "You'll die." "Maybe," I said, "but not before I break one of them." That changed the mood. Charntuk stepped forward and said nothing, but I saw it in his eyes. "Do it." The first challenger came in heavy, brutish, fast for his size. He didn't last 60 seconds. I didn't fight clean, I fought human, dirty elbows, joint breaks, a headbutt that shattered his nasal crest. The crowd roared when he dropped. The second one lasted longer. Third nearly broke my arm. Fourth cut my shoulder open so deep I saw bone. But I stood, bleeding, breathing, staring. I didn't win all of them, but I didn't fall, and that's what they remembered. The human who bled and kept standing. The human who fought like an animal cornered in a cage. The one who didn't sit at the front, but who still walked away when the dust settled. That night, Vrak brought me a drink. Not the ceremonial kind, the real kind. "You've made your point," he said. "They'll follow you now, not as a leader." "As what then?" He smiled. "As a warning." The bruises hadn't healed yet when the message came in. My shoulder was still stiff from the last pit fight, and I'd woken up with dried blood under my fingernails. But there was no rest now. Not after the show I'd put on for the clans. Not after the Anorix started whispering my name in war tones, like I was some kind of ghost story walking upright. The calm crackled to life in our temporary quarters. Charntuk answered it, his face hardening the moment the voice on the other side came through. "It's not secure," he said. I stood from the metal bench. "Who is it?" He held out the audio. "Threx, open channel." That got my full attention. I took the earpiece. What came through wasn't words at first, just that low, clicking pulse their kind used to layer emotions under speech: hunger, hate, challenge. Then came the voice. "We expected you to die quietly, Ape," I smiled. "You expected wrong?" A pause. Then more clicks, faster now, agitation. "You bring chaos. Weak species follow your scent like blood in the air. The galaxy forgets who rules the void." "I didn't forget," I said. "I just stopped pretending to be afraid." The Threx voice deepened, a tone I'd heard before, not on comms, but in the middle of a battlefield. It was their warning growl. "Then remember this. No more words. No more battleships. No more excuses. We come. For you. For the traitors who stand beside you. For the species that forgot fear." "Good," I said. "We bring more than last time." "I'm tired of killing amateurs." The line went dead. I turned to Charntuk. "Well," I said, "I guess we're famous." He didn't look amused. "The clans will want to respond." I nodded. "Let them. But not by hiding behind shields." "You mean to strike first?" "I mean to end this." The Anorix didn't move fast, not by our standards. They were methodical, deliberate, But once the decision was made, things shifted quickly. Within 2 hours of the Threx transmission, the war room was packed. Clan leaders, captains, even exiles who hadn't been seen in cycles. Not all were ready to fight for a human, but enough were ready to fight because of one. Sharntak stood beside me as I stepped into the center of the chamber again. This time, no pit. This time, it was strategy. Vorak sat nearest, arms folded, old wounds gleaming like battle medals across his armored chest. "You heard their threat," I said. "You know they're coming. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they'll come." Murmurs of agreement. I continued. "But this isn't just about me anymore. You've been looking for a reason to break from the leash the Coalition keeps on your necks. Well, here it is." More murmurs, heavier now. "If the Threx come for me," I said, "they won't stop at my death. They'll target everyone who stood beside me, every Onorix who ever shared a command deck with a human, every clan that spoke my name." Silence. "But if we hit them first, if we burn one of their hunting moons to cinders, then maybe they'll remember the lesson they forgot at Nymery Drift." Vrak stood slowly. "You want us to strike Threx territory without Coalition approval?" "No," I said. "I want you to do what warriors do best. Act before bureaucrats decide if survival's worth the paperwork." That got a few growls of amusement. But not everyone smiled. One of the younger clan leaders stepped forward, sleek armor, bright insignia. He was still shiny. Still believed rules kept blood off his hands. "If we go rogue," he said, "we risk more than war. We risk exile, sanctions, disgrace." I stepped forward. "No, you risk history forgetting who you are." He opened his mouth to respond, but Virak cut him off. "He's right." That stopped the room cold. Virak looked at me, not with softness, but with something even harder, conviction. "This is the first time in 5 cycles a human stood here and asked us to fight without apology. Without permission. You may not like how he speaks, but you know damn well we've needed someone to say it." Then he pointed to me. "This human didn't come here begging for protection. He came offering war, and I say we give it to him." Cheers. Fists pounded armor. Some still sat silently. But that was enough. We launched 2 days later, not with a fleet, just 3 strike cruisers, all unregistered, clan-owned, black-plated, and unmarked. They wouldn't show up on Coalition logs, wouldn't trigger diplomacy alarms. That was the point. These weren't sanctioned warriors. They were ghosts. I rode on the Breach Fang, an older Onorix cruiser with scars across its hull and weapons that had been patched together with stubbornness and leftover hate. Sharntak joined me. When I asked why, he just said, "Because when they kill you, I want to be the last thing they see after." That was as close to friendship as you get from a warrior like him. Our target was simple, a Threx outer observation post orbiting a derelict gas planet in the Elthera Drift. It was a listening moon. They used it to monitor traffic, intercept comms, and scout weaknesses in regional defenses. Hitting it wouldn't be a strategic blow. It would be a message. We arrived undetected. They never saw us coming. And we didn't offer surrender. No broadcast, no threat, no demand, just fire. The first volley tore through their upper structure. The second breached their core. The third? That was mine. Personal. I rode the boarding team. Me, a human, leading Onorix warriors into close combat. The Threx were ready for battle, but they weren't ready for rage. I didn't shoot my first enemy. I stabbed him, straight through the throat with a thermoblade I'd taken from the crate on Theta 7. He screamed in 3 different vocal frequencies. The Onorix behind me laughed. They called me Kordanma that day. In their language, it meant the one who strikes after silence. When the dust settled, the station was gone. We stood on the wreckage, watching the moon crack open and fall toward the gas giant below. Sharntak stood beside me. "They'll come harder now," he said. "I hope so," I said. Because now I wasn't just the human they feared. I was the one who taught others how to fight like us. You can hear it in the silence. The calm after a strike like ours isn't peace, it's pressure. Like the quiet just before a bomb goes off. The kind that isn't meant to shake the ground, but to erase you from memory. That's the Coalition's specialty. They don't retaliate with fire. They retaliate with isolation. We didn't hear from them for 3 full days after we turned the Threx observation moon into a falling carcass of scrap. No formal declaration, no condemnations, no threats, just silence. But messages were moving. Not across open channels, in the background noise. Backroom council flickers. Trans-dimensional packets. The kind of chatter that doesn't show up in war logs but reshapes the field all the same. They weren't preparing to arrest me. They were preparing to make me irrelevant. We returned to Onoric's space, docking at a remote stronghold in the Ankar Fold. It wasn't Coalition-mapped, one of those hidden way stations used by the clans during the pre-Accord skirmishes. Old, half-rusted, but filled with warriors who didn't care much for galactic law. The moment I stepped off the breach fang, I knew something had shifted. It was in their eyes. The warriors who'd once watched me like I was a curiosity now saluted. No hesitation, no mocking. Sharntak didn't say a word. He just walked beside me like it was always meant to be this way. A human among Onoric's command. A ghost wearing war scars like decorations. But not everyone was pleased. "Come," Sharntak said. "There's someone you should meet." We entered one of the old war halls, steel walls lit with dull red, a central circular table where decisions were once carved into stone. The place smelled like oil, dust, and dried blood, the history of violence hanging in the air like perfume. Inside stood 3 Onorics I didn't recognize. 2 male, 1 female. Elder markings on their armor, clan bloodlines etched into shoulder plates. High blood, no doubt, leaders who had remained loyal to the Coalition even as others peeled away. They weren't here to support me. They were here to challenge me. "You've ignited something dangerous," one of them said, voice thick and bitter. "Something that can't be put back in the bottle." I stood across from him. "Good, that was the point." "You're destabilizing the balance we fought to protect." "Balance," I said, "is just another word for stasis." The woman stepped forward now. Her voice was more deliberate, sharper. "You have no seat among our leaders, no blood claim, no ancestral bond." I met her stare. "I have something better." "And what's that?" "Survivor's authority." That made them pause. "You think any of your decorated counselors would have made it through what I did?" I continued. "You think any of them would have stood still while 3 Threx warriors charged and not broken? You've built your hierarchy around tradition and bloodlines. I built mine in fire." I took a slow step forward. "You don't have to like me. Hell, you don't even have to stand next to me. But don't pretend the clans aren't listening now. And don't think for a second that I care whether they salute me or not. I don't need their love. Just their wrath." For a long beat, no one spoke. Then the older male nodded once. "We'll watch, for now." Then they left. Sharntak stood beside me in the silence. "They're old," he said. "They don't understand what's coming." I shook my head. "They do," I replied. "They just hoped it'd come slower." Later that night, I found my quarters had been accessed. Not broken into, not ransacked. Accessed. Deliberately. A single item sat on the center table. A black tablet with a blinking blue light. Coalition tech, not Onoric's. And when I turned it on, I wasn't surprised to see who was calling. Calden. Still clean. Still polished. still carrying that diplomatic neutrality like a disease he didn't know he had. "Commander," he said. "Or do you still use that title?" I didn't sit, just stared at the screen. "What do you want?" "I want to offer you a chance to step down." I laughed. "You're kidding. This isn't a threat. This is the last remaining sliver of courtesy you'll get." "You think I care about courtesy?" "I think you care about your species." That stopped me for half a second. He saw it, leaned in. "You're making enemies in places that don't fire bullets, Commander. Places that rewrite history, adjust rosters, restructure funding. Do you know what happens to humans when Earth stops getting its coalition stipends? When trade routes are cut? When patrol fleets stop protecting its outer colonies?" He let it hang there, like a blade over my people's neck. "You're threatening Earth now?" I asked quietly. "No," he said. "I'm showing you what your survival has started." I clenched my jaw. And then I said the thing that killed the last thread holding us together. "Then maybe Earth needs to stop acting like it's still begging for scraps." His eyes narrowed. "You've made your choice, then." "I did the first time I picked up a weapon." He ended the call without another word. The next day, the hit started. Not a bullet, not a strike team, not a Threx assault. Something worse. They erased me. Quietly, methodically. First, I was locked out of the Coalition database, my ID flagged as corrupted. No rank, no history, no battle logs. Then, Coalition press units issued a joint statement that the incident at the Threx observation post was carried out by unsanctioned mercenary actors. No mention of humans. No Honorix connection. Within 24 hours, 3 news outlets ran identical op-eds calling for re-evaluation of human integration into frontline operations. They were wiping me off the board, making it so in 5 years, no one would remember who I was. Just a ghost, a glitch in the system, a forgotten problem quietly buried under paperwork. The worst part? It was working, until it wasn't. One of the Honorix warcasters, a tech chief named Vorak, came to my quarters that night, face like a crater. Hands always twitching from old nerve damage, but sharp. Too sharp. He showed me the transmission logs. Someone inside the Coalition had flagged any mention of me for auto-redaction across public channels. AI filters, keyword scrubs, social penalty scores for users discussing the unauthorized human operative. They were using the same tools they used on disinformation campaigns. "Your name," Vorak said, "is now a curse word." I stared at the screen, watched it blink. Then I smiled. "Perfect." "Burn it all," I told him. "Sir? Open up every hidden feed, every dark line relay, push the pit fights, push the moon assault, show them everything. The wounds, the screams, the blood, the Honorix that saluted me, the Threx that begged before I cut its spine." He hesitated. "Coalition will retaliate." "Then let them." I stood slowly. "We don't need their seat. We don't need their permission. Let the galaxy see the truth." Vorak smiled. "You want fear." "No," I said. "I want clarity." He transmitted the feed within the hour, unfiltered, uncensored, and in one night I went from myth to war cry. The backlash came fast. A dozen fringe systems declared their refusal to cooperate with Coalition blacklists. Several Honorix clans broke formal rank. And deep in Coalition command, they issued an internal order. Designation: Human Aberrant. Status: Terminate on sight. I read the decrypted memo myself, and I laughed. Because now, they finally understood. Humans don't lead from the front, we lead from the shadows. And when the stars start burning again, the ones who survive won't be the ones in the command seats. They'll be the ones you tried to bury, the ones who got back up. We didn't sleep the night the feed went out. Not because we were afraid of being found. It was too late for fear. We didn't sleep because we knew the moment that footage hit the outer channels, there would be no turning back. The footage of the pit fights, the moon assault, me covered in blood, dragging a Threx commander across a steel floor, Charn-Tak saluting a human in front of his warriors, a transmission spliced into the middle, my voice. We didn't ask for your respect. We asked for a chance. You told us to sit down. Now you'll learn what happens when humans stand up. The effect was nuclear. Within hours, the broadcast was being mirrored across black channels, pirate networks, and dissident cores. Fringe worlds shared it like a virus. Entire systems with coalition embassies disabled their access ports in protest. Honoric civil sectors didn't riot. They recruited. Old banners, pre-coalition, clan-worn, blood-soaked, were hung from strongholds across the fold. The ones who had stayed quiet for cycles were speaking again. But while the galaxy buzzed, I felt it first. Something else was listening. And it wasn't coalition. It started with a signal, low frequency, static-drenched, something Vorak picked up while monitoring deep system echoes. He was trying to trace coalition reaction chatter but kept getting cross-fed by a strange loop. No origin, no routing signature, just coordinates. Dead space. Is it Threx? I asked him. He shook his head. Too clean. Threx comms are aggressive. They spike. This is measured, old. Too old for our systems. Could it be coalition encryption? Maybe, but not one I've ever seen. He paused, staring at the line of coordinates. It almost looks patterned. That got my attention. Show me. He brought up the data stream, a blinking string of pulses, then silence, then again. Blinking. Paused. Blinking. A message. In Morse code. Old Earth language. Pre-spaceflight. I leaned in. Heard you. We're coming. Don't sit up front. My blood went cold. It didn't make sense. The only species who used Morse was us, humans. No one else bothered with such inefficient communication systems. But this wasn't us. At least not any version I knew. Vorak confirmed it. No coalition ship had sent it. No Threx scout was in range. And yet, the signal had passed through 4 relay points across dead systems, places that weren't even on the star charts anymore. Old war zones. Grave sectors. Do we respond? He asked. No, I said. We trace. That decision saved us. 3 hours later, another message arrived. Same format. Keep fighting. You're not alone. This time the coordinates pointed to a forgotten system on the edge of the void wall, the boundary between charted galaxy and the unknown. A place called Drelkur's Reach. I knew the name. Barely. Not because it was important now, but because of what it used to be. The site of humanity's first off-world blackout. A colony established 200 years ago, reported destroyed by a Threx raid. Except, no one ever found bodies. No wreckage, no distress beacons, just silence. The coalition had quietly buried it, called it a communications failure, and moved on. But someone had survived, and they were talking to me. We left that night. Charn-Tak, Vorak, myself, and a crew of 10 Honorix veterans who had already decided their future didn't belong in the hands of council seats. The Breachfang jumped without a filed log. No destination. No return signal. We crossed the void wall in 6 hours. Drelkur's Reach wasn't dead, but it wasn't alive either. The system was dark. Too dark. Stars here felt colder. Not in temperature. In presence, like they were watching. Waiting. The colony was still intact, hanging in low orbit above a dead blue moon. Its hull was coated in micro-debris. The lights were dim, no external movement, but the signal pulsed strong. Are we going in? Vorak asked. I nodded, but even before we docked, I felt it. Pressure, like the air itself was heavier, like we were being watched from underneath the skin of space. We landed without resistance. The hatch opened. And the silence that met us was wrong, too complete. No hum, no echo, no sound of failing machinery or automated systems. Just absence. Stay close, I told the others. Inside the station, everything was pristine. Not broken, not bloodied, just frozen. As if someone had walked out of their shift and never came back. The crew quarters were untouched. Kitchens clean, computers off, but not dead. Waiting. We reached the central core, and that's when the lights turned on. All at once, no warning, no flicker, bright, blinding, and standing in the middle of the command deck was a human, tall, pale, eyes like polished obsidian, uniform black, unmarked, not Earth military, not coalition, something else. He smiled, like he'd been expecting me. "Welcome back," he said. Sharntak raised his weapon. Vorak followed. I raised a hand. "Stand down." The man turned to face me. "You've made quite a mess," he said calmly. "Impressive, really." "Who the hell are you?" "I'm part of the reason this place isn't on your maps anymore." "You from Earth?" He chuckled. "I'm from before Earth." That didn't make sense. He took a slow step forward. "We were the first," he said. "The first human fleet to cross the wall. Before the coalition. Before the treaties. Before the leash." I stared at him. "That's not possible." He looked me in the eye. "Do you really think the coalition let Earth into their halls because of our potential? Our charm? No. They brought us in because they found us, out here, in places we weren't supposed to be, doing things they didn't understand." I felt the weight of it then. The lie, the cover-up, the truth behind Earth's entry into the galactic stage. "You survived." "We evolved," he corrected. "While Earth argued over borders, we bled. While the Council debated how to control humans, we learned what fear looks like in the dark." He stepped closer. "You made them remember. That's why they're trying to erase you." I narrowed my eyes. "Why send for me now?" "Because we can't hide anymore. You've lit the fuse, and when the fire reaches this end of the galaxy..." He paused. "They'll finally see why humans don't sit up front." Outside the colony, ships were moving. Dozens, silent, black, human design, but unlike anything I'd seen. No lights, no IFF, no transponders, just shadows with engines. The man looked at me one last time. "You've started something that can't be stopped, but you don't have to stand alone anymore." And just like that, he was gone. Literally gone. No flash, no sound. Just gone. I looked at Sharntak. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. We were looking at the real reason the Coalition feared us, not because of what Earth had become, but because of what we used to be, and what we still could be. We left Drelkar's reach in silence. Not out of fear. Not anymore. Silence was the only way to process what we'd seen. The man with obsidian eyes. The fleet that wasn't there 1 minute, and then was. The station that hadn't aged a day in 2 centuries. And the words he left me with, "You lit the fuse. You don't have to stand alone anymore." I still didn't know what they were, not officially, not on paper. But I knew what they weren't. They weren't Earths. They weren't coalitions. And they sure as hell weren't ghosts. They were humanity unfiltered, the version that had gone out into the void. Unshackled by rules, untouched by councils, never told where to sit or how to speak. And now, they were watching me. Which meant we weren't just fighting the coalition anymore. We were stepping into a war between what humanity had become and what it had refused to be. Sharntak stood on the bridge of the breach fang, arms folded, staring at the now dormant reach behind us as we drifted away. The silence between us stretched longer than usual. He finally spoke. "They weren't ghosts." "No," I said. "They weren't coalition. Definitely not." "Then what were they?" I took a long breath. "Proof." He turned to me, confused. "Proof," I said again, "that we were never supposed to be pets in this galaxy, that we didn't need permission to survive." His jaw tightened. "They were watching us. Preparing. Waiting," I corrected. "For someone to remind the galaxy that we're not domesticated." He looked away. "You're not afraid of what they are?" "I'm more afraid of what they've been waiting for." We dropped back into real space, 10 clicks from the Ankar fold, outside Honoric's sovereign sectors. Not because we feared retaliation, but because I needed time. To think, to plan, to understand. That didn't last long. Vorak met me in the command center with a face like carved stone. "They moved on Earth." The words hit harder than they should have. "What do you mean?" I asked, low. He threw up a display. Encrypted coalition footage, shaky and filtered but clear enough. Protests. EarthGov headquarters in flames. Coalition peacekeepers dragging civilians out of bunkers. Outer colonies reporting blackouts. Supply lines cut. Then came the real footage. Coalition Security Command broadcasting emergency authority. Due to systemic instability, human political autonomy is suspended until further evaluation. "What the hell?" Jarntak read it before I did. "They're turning Earth into a protectorate. No warning, no vote, just compliance through crisis." I stared at the screen. All those years we spent trying to prove we belonged, and now they were wiping our name off the map. I clenched my fists. "They're doing it to show me what happens when a human steps out of line." Vorak nodded. "They're expecting you to run back, to beg." "They don't know me very well." I turned to him. "Put me through to every Honorix clan channel we've got." "All of them?" Vorak asked. "All of them," I said. "And any human colonies that haven't gone dark." "What's the message?" I looked at the EarthGov seal blinking on the screen, and I gave the only message I knew they'd understand. "They took our seat at the table, so we're building our own." Within 12 hours, 9 Honorix clans confirmed support. 3 more sent silence, which was better than refusal. But the humans? They weren't silent. Not anymore. A feed came in from the asteroid settlements on the border of the Ursa Drift. A kid, barely 20, holding a rifle older than he was, standing in front of a broken station flag. "You don't have to come back to Earth," he said. "We've got your back out here. The frontier remembers what you did, what they tried to bury." Then came more. Scattered transmissions, miners, smugglers, colony militia, no uniforms, no structure, just voices. "Coalition shut down our ports. They think we'll fold. They forgot what humans do when we've got nothing left to lose. And then, we never wanted a war, but we'll finish one." We called it the Signal War, not because of weapons, because of truth. We didn't fire the first shot. We just showed the galaxy what was already happening. The truth the coalition was scrambling to bury with policies, lockouts, and PR damage control. We showed the camps on Europa's second moon, where Earth civilians were being relocated for their safety. We showed the silent executions of human traders in neutral ports. We showed the lockdowns, the supply seizures, the erasure. And we asked one question. If this is peace, what does war look like? The response? Explosive, not from humans, from species that had quietly resented the coalition for decades. The Kravari syndicates refused to cooperate with coalition enforcers. The Varathi merchant guilds rerouted resources to non-aligned sectors. The Onorix? They burned a coalition diplomatic ship in orbit, then issued a single-word declaration. Unbound. The Treaty of Centurial Accord, the foundation of the modern coalition, was fracturing. And it started because a human got tired of being told where to sit. 3 days after the Earth lockdown, I received a message. Not from Earth, not from the hidden fleet beyond the void wall, not from any Onorix ally, from the Threx, unencrypted, unfiltered. A voice made of static and hate. We have seen your kind evolve before. We thought we had ended it. Pause. But you keep coming back, even in fire. Another pause. So now, we stop waiting. Attached was a single data pulse. Coordinates. Earth's orbit, dated 3 days from now. The meaning was clear. They weren't going to let the coalition erase us. They were going to vaporize us instead. I didn't sleep that night. The old me would have raged, thrown a table, demanded war. But the version of me standing in that black chamber now? He understood what the Threx had just done. They didn't declare war on humanity. They declared war on hope. And the only way to stop them was to beat them at their own game. Not with numbers, not with fleets, but with fear. The kind humans don't just create, the kind we become. Get me every rogue ship in the sector, I said to Vorak. Pirates, exiles, mercenaries, doesn't matter. What are you planning? A response. To the strike? No, I said, to the galaxy. I looked at Charntak. Tell your warriors to ready their blades. Then I looked at the feed of Earth. Flickering. Silent. Beautiful. We're going back. There's something about looking at Earth from orbit that hits harder after you've seen how the rest of the galaxy works. When you're born there, it feels small, fragile, conflicted. A planet still figuring out what kind of species it wants to be. But when you come back from the stars, after fighting on alien soil, bleeding in steel corridors, and watching empires treat your people like a curiosity, it hits different. Earth's not just home. It's proof we're still standing. Even after everything. Even after being pushed to the back, lied to, regulated, silenced. And now the Threx were coming to finish the job. No warning, no declaration, just annihilation. Because to them, humanity had forgotten its place. And the only thing worse than a dangerous species is a disobedient one. The Breachfang dropped out of sublight 2 million clicks from Earth's moon. Ahead of us, open space, quiet comms, and too much silence from a planet that was supposed to be protected. No coalition patrols, no defense grid, no orbital responses. They were letting the Threx do their dirty work. And Earth was alone. Local feeds are jammed, Vorak said, scanning the channels. All I'm getting is static. They're choking the comms, Charntak said, cutting the world off before the strike. I nodded. Classic Threx doctrine. Blind the target, then vaporize it. Can we break the jam? Vorak asked. I shook my head. We don't need to. He frowned. Then how do we warn them? I turned toward the viewport. We don't warn them. I turned back to Vorak, fire in my chest. We make the Threx bleed instead. There were 3 Threx ships inbound, a spear formation, classic extermination fleet, 1 main dread cruiser and 2 flank strikers, fast and heavily armed. All 3 had their weapons charged and trajectories locked on Earth's orbit. The Threx didn't fight for territory. They fought to erase mistakes, and they'd labeled us a mistake. Any other fleets in range? I asked. None friendly, Vorak said. Coalition won't respond, and Earth's orbital defenses barely functional. We can't take them head on, Charntak said. We'll be ripped apart before we get within weapons range. I nodded. Then we don't fight them like a fleet. They looked at me. We fight them like humans. Here's what they didn't know. The Threks have never fought us on our terms. They've fought diplomats, soldiers in uniforms, fleets built to coalition specs, but they've never fought humans willing to die messy, to use scrap as bombs, to use debris as cover, to turn their own bodies into the trigger. They didn't know that humans don't attack like tacticians. We ambush like lunatics. We don't sacrifice troops for victory. We sacrifice ourselves just to prove we were there. We rigged the breach fang for controlled failure, power reroute, weapon overload, armor strip. "Are you out of your mind?" Vorak asked as I pulled out paneling and exposed the power conduits. "Probably," I said, grinning, "but this ship was never meant to come back." "What's the plan?" I pulled up the Threx fleet map on Holo. "We look like one ship, right? Old, broken, desperate. They'll think we're a suicide run." "Because we are," Sharntak said flatly. "Exactly. And while they're focused on this, the other ships move in." "What ships?" I tapped the console. The map shifted. 5 rogue vessels, all human, old, mismatched, undergunned, but crewed by fighters, not diplomats, fringe militias, smugglers, ex-soldiers, people who still believed Earth meant something, people who had heard the signal war broadcasts. They'd shown up quiet, unannounced, but not unarmed. "Are they willing to die?" Vorak asked. "No," I said. "They're willing to kill, and that's better." We launched the assault 90 minutes before the Threks were in range. Breachfang went first, shields off, weapons cold, looking like a desperate last stand. We broadcast a single phrase on all open frequencies. "Come see why humans don't sit up front." The Threks bit. Hard. The first strike came from their right wing, plasma barrage aimed at disabling our engines. I let them hit us. We drifted sideways, spun uncontrolled. The hull vented atmosphere. Sparks flew. Systems glitched, all exactly as planned. Then the flankers hit them. 3 human ships decloaked from a debris field we seeded earlier, using scrap from broken coalition stations. They weren't powerful, but they were angry, and they were fast. 1 human freighter slammed into the smaller Threx ship at ramming speed, exploded mid-collision. 2 more ships released thousands of modified mining charges, not enough to pierce shields, but enough to blind their sensors. And through that blind came us. I grabbed the manual override. "Sharntak, now!" He slammed the thruster override with his armored fist. The breach fang jolted forward. Systems screaming, heat levels redlining. "Impact in 30 seconds, I climbed into the weapons chair. "You're not going to fire?" Vorak asked. I looked at him. "I'm going to detonate." We struck the Threx dread cruiser at full burn, nose first. Just as our shields collapsed, I hit the final command. M-core dump, maximum voltage. The breach fang exploded, not outward, but inward, turning into a localized black flash that swallowed the Threx cruiser's forward cannons. Not a kill, but a cripple. The power surge fried their targeting systems. The hull bent like paper. And in the opening came the others. Sharntak launched the drop pod we'd hidden inside the Fang's outer cargo bay. We slammed through the dread cruiser's side, breached their hull, and charged the command deck with only plasma blades and smoke. It was chaos. Exactly how humans like it. Threx blood is black, it stains everything, and it smells like burning metal. I cut the commander across the throat with a blade made from a repurposed coolant pipe. Vorak snapped the limbs off their lieutenant. Sharntak tore through them like they were made of string. We left no survivors. I stood over the command node and transmitted a final message to the remaining Threx ship. I looked straight into the cam, blood on my face, clothes torn, no armor, just rage. "You came to erase us. You should have brought more. Now go back and tell them, we're not just still here." I leaned in. "We're coming for you next." When it was over, Earth's orbit was littered with debris. Our debris, theirs, and the kind of silence that means victory cost something. But Earth was still there, still breathing, still ours. We didn't return to Earth's surface, not because we weren't welcome, because we weren't done. Within 24 hours, 30 more human ships appeared on long-range scans, old ones, hidden ones that hadn't flown in decades. They'd heard the call. And with them, Onorix, Cravery, even a Varathi weapons cartel ship, flying a flag I'd never seen before, a human skull wrapped in barbed wire. We weren't a fleet. We were a movement. And now, we were going hunting. We didn't celebrate, not after Earth. The wreckage still hung in orbit like broken teeth, a reminder that survival wasn't victory. It was just the right to keep bleeding. We'd pushed back the Threx, made them blink, sent a message. But deep down, we knew this wasn't over. It was only now beginning. Because the galaxy wasn't just reacting to us. It was changing because of us. And the ones watching from the edges, the species too old, too alien, too far removed from what the Coalition even knew existed, they had questions. Questions that started with one word. Why? Why did a species the Coalition once labeled as barely Tier 2 now stand toe-to-toe with the Threx? Why had every attempt to erase us only made us louder? Why were more ships flocking to our cause, even ones from species who should have feared us? And most terrifying of all, why were humans not afraid to die anymore? We regrouped near the ruins of the Zarn Belt, a shattered asteroid field that once housed ancient mining colonies, long abandoned, long forgotten. It was a dead zone. Perfect for people like us. Vorak, Zharntak, myself, and now over 50 ships, human and non-human alike. We weren't a formal fleet. We had no hierarchy. But we had momentum, and that was worse than any army. The Zarn debris cloud offered cover, signal interference, anonymity. But even in that silence, something was off. "Tell me that isn't just me," I said, staring at the long-range sensor board. Vorak leaned in. "No, I see it too." The static wasn't natural. It moved, shifted, not like a ship, more like a shadow pretending to be background radiation. Zharntak stood near the viewport, still as a statue. "You feel it too," I said. He nodded once. "It's like being hunted, but by something older." The feeling didn't pass. If anything, it grew stronger, like we were sitting on a grave that was trying to open. That night, a signal came through. Not Threx, not Coalition, not human, just a tone. Low, cold, constant, a pulse of pressure through the comms. It repeated exactly every 90 seconds. Vorak ran decryption, ran cross-species algorithm matches. Nothing. Until he went old. Earth old. Pre-space old. It was binary, translated through old Earth coding systems, the kind we stopped using before we ever built our first orbital station. The message said, "We saw the fire again. You still burn. We are not done with you." That was all. Then silence. I didn't sleep. I walked the hull of the Fang's forward deck, magnetic boots, cold visor, no sound but my own breathing. The debris field stretched in every direction, illuminated only by distant starlight and the occasional flicker of reactor dust. That's when I saw it. Not movement, just absence, a shape where starlight should have been. Too perfect, too still, like space itself had blinked. Then it moved. Not with thrusters. It just shifted, like the universe made room for it. I hit the internal comm. "Vorak, record this. Timecode now." The shadow pulsed once, then vanished. Not cloaked. Gone. Like it had never been there. Back inside, Vorak was pale. For an Onorix, that took effort. "You saw it too?" He nodded. Tell me that was a ship, I said. He shook his head. No signature, no mass, but the stars bent around it. Something was there. Is it a weapon? I think it's older than weapons. That didn't make sense, but it didn't have to, because a second message arrived an hour later. Same frequency, same binary. You left us, but we never left you. You owe the debt of origin. This time there was a location attached. Dead system. No name, no charts. Just a black dot on the edge of a collapsed star chain. I looked at it for a long time. Then back at Vorak. How far? 3 jumps. Prep the Fang. The fleet didn't argue. They'd seen enough by now to understand one simple truth. If something's looking for humanity, and it's this quiet, then it's already closer than we think. 10 ships followed me. The rest stayed behind to guard the Zarn Belt, in case the Coalition got bold again, or if the Threks changed their minds. Our jump was clean. But the destination? Wasn't. We dropped into a system without a star. No warmth, no light, just gravitational drag and the pull of something impossible. The dead world ahead of us was black, not from terrain, but from design. No atmosphere, no surface radiation, no life. But it was covered in structures, tall, narrow, lined with what looked like spines or towers or teeth, like a city built by creatures who didn't need to see. Just remember, we didn't send a probe. We went ourselves, because whoever called us here wanted to speak to us face to face. The moment we landed, our ship systems flickered, not failed, just questioned. Like something inside the world was testing our machines, asking them why they existed at all. The airlock opened without us telling it to, and the voice came again, not through audio, not through comms, but inside our heads. You opened the fire again. You wear the name that burns. We knew what you would become, and still we let you go. We stepped out into darkness, but our steps made sound, and that was wrong, because there was no atmosphere. Yet we heard every footfall, every breath, as if the world wanted us to remember we were alive. Charntak said nothing. Neither did Vorak. They were listening. Because whatever this was, it didn't speak in words, it spoke in memories. And suddenly, violently, mine were not mine alone. I saw flames, ash, humans ripping apart machines with bare hands, a city of light collapsing into a black hole, screaming with voices that weren't human, but were terrified of humans. I saw Earth, before Earth, and I heard it. The voice, not outside, inside. You are the echo of our mistake. We made you to adapt, but we gave you pain, and pain became memory, and memory became vengeance. I fell to my knees. So did Charntak. So did Vorak. We weren't being shown history. We were being downloaded, whole eras shoved into our brains in seconds. The truth hit like a blade to the spine. We hadn't evolved on Earth alone. We were seeded. Humanity was part of something ancient, created, experimented on, and then abandoned. But instead of fading, we adapted. We fought, we remembered, and now, our creators? They were afraid. The voice spoke one last time. You were never meant to lead, but now you are the fire. We cannot stop you, but we can ask, will you burn us all, or will you show us how to survive again? Then everything went black. I woke on the Fang's medic. So did the others. No injuries. No memory of how we got back aboard. Just one thing in my hand. A shard of black crystal. Still warm. Still pulsing. I didn't know what it meant yet. But I knew this. We weren't alone in the galaxy. Not by species. Not by origin. And not by fate. And now? Every eye in the stars would be watching what humanity did next. Because we weren't just survivors anymore. We were the heirs of fire. I didn't speak for hours after we left the dark world. No one did, Not Vorak, not Sharntak, not a single one of the 10 crew members aboard the Breach Fang. Because how do you talk about the moment you realize your species was never meant to be free? We were built, modified, programmed to adapt, left on a rock to die. And we didn't. That wasn't evolution. It wasn't divine fate. It was rebellion. We were the accident that kept fighting. We were the weapon they lost control of. And now we had a choice, to rise with that knowledge, or to let it consume us. We jumped back into Zarnbelt space a full day later. I half expected our allies to be gone, hunted, scattered, broken. But they were still there, waiting. And more had come. Human freighters from the Pashan Drift, smuggler bands flying no flags but showing up anyway. An old mining ship converted into a gun platform that still had bloodstains in the airlock. And Honorics, clans that had once sworn oaths to the Coalition, now sharpening blades in open defiance. Vorak watched the fleet numbers light up one by one. 73 ships, he said. 73 too many if the Coalition gets nervous, I muttered. They're already nervous, Sharntak added. They've begun massing near the Krelian border. 13 fleets, 4 dreadnoughts. No official orders yet. But they're moving. Staging? He nodded. It's a decapitation strike. They didn't want a war. They wanted an example. I stared at the display. They're going to hit Earth again. The emergency summit was held 2 hours later, not a formal one, not in the Coalition style. This one was held on the hull of a dead Kravari cargo ship floating just outside the asteroid perimeter. No walls, no chairs, just gravity boots, voice links, and a circle of those who were too angry to sit anymore. There were 12 of us, 6 humans, 3 Honorics, 2 Kravari captains, 1 Varathi weapons broker who didn't speak, just recorded. I stood in the center. Not because I wanted to, because they made me. You've started something you can't finish, one of the Kravari said. Do you understand that? Yes, I said. Then why continue? I looked at him. Because they made Earth kneel, and now they think we'll bow next. You represent only a fraction of humanity. I smiled. Then imagine what happens when the rest catch up. One of the Honorics, a younger clan lord named Vrosk, spoke next. You're not asking us to help. You're pulling us into a war that will destroy what's left of our honor. No, I said. I'm giving you a chance to redefine it. He went quiet. The oldest human in the circle, a woman named Lena Alcor, gray hair, skin like scarred leather, former orbital tactician, crossed her arms. The Coalition thinks we're bluffing, she said. They won't think that for long, I replied. I pulled out the black shard, the one from the dark world. It pulsed in my hand, faintly warm. They're watching us now, I said. The ones who made us, the ones who walked away, and they're waiting to see if we become the same monsters that made them fear us. And if we do? Alcor asked. I looked around the circle. Then they'll burn the galaxy to erase us. No one flinched. That was when I knew. It was war now, not just with the Coalition. Not just with the Threks, but with the myth of what humans were supposed to be, and we were about to rewrite it in blood. The plan wasn't complicated, because complicated gets people killed. We had 3 days before the Coalition fleets finished massing at the Krelian border. 4 days before their forward command reached Earth orbit again. So we would strike first. Not the fleets. Not their capital stations. We would hit command itself, the heart of the Coalition, where policy becomes action. Station Solaris Prime, built on the bones of a broken moon. Population 900,000. Command personnel 4,500. War Corps staff 200. It wasn't just a station. It was the brain of the entire system. And we weren't going to take it. We were going to show it that humans don't ask for permission anymore. We weren't bombing it. We weren't invading. We were broadcasting from it, inside it, with cameras, with witnesses, with every species watching. Because sometimes terror isn't in firepower, it's in presence, in showing up where you're not allowed and speaking louder than anyone told you you could. We moved in fast. 4 cloaked freighters, all civilian, all low signal. We docked with maintenance hatches on the far side of Solaris Prime, outside sensor range, using old Coalition access codes Vorak had stolen during his resignation. We hit the interior like a virus. No weapons drawn, just speed. We reached the command broadcast center in 17 minutes, locked it down, wired the feeds, and turned on the lights. Then I stood in front of the camera, one human, in a Coalition control room, broadcasting live across every star system from here to the Orion Wall. They told you we were dangerous. They told you we were unstable. They said humans needed to be kept at the back, forgotten, obeying, waiting. But we waited long enough. I stepped forward. You wanted to erase us, so we erased the chains. You wanted us quiet, so we screamed. And now we're not asking. I raised the shard. It pulsed, brighter now, and for a moment, all the feeds went black. Then showed the Creator's voice. Just one phrase. You were made to adapt. Now you are free. Let them adapt to you. Silence. The feed cut. We vanished before the guards breached the control deck. We left no weapons behind, no explosives, no dead, just the message. Hours later, I received a personal transmission, unauthenticated, Coalition encrypted, direct from High Command. The voice? Calden. Still alive, still smug, still scared. Are you proud of this? He asked. Terror tactics? Threats? This is how you lead now? No, I said. This is how I warn you. You're playing with matches in a powder field. No, I said, you are, and you think the fire won't spread. He paused. This ends soon. You're right. I leaned forward. It ends when you remember why humans never sat up front. Because we weren't waiting our turn. We were deciding if the galaxy was worth saving. And I cut the feed. There are no trumpets in real war. No drum beats, no slow-motion speeches, just silence, tight armor, loaded weapons, and the sharp, cold understanding that not everyone is walking away. We left the Solaris system under fire, flak trails behind us, ships scrambling to intercept, but too late. The feed had already gone out. The damage was done. We didn't win a battle that day. We rewrote the battlefield, and now we were watching what came next. 3 days. That's how long we gave them. 3 days to answer. 3 days for the Coalition to pick between escalation or surrender. They chose neither. They chose something worse. They chose desperation. Reports came in from every edge of the mapped galaxy. Human colonies disappearing without distress calls. Onyx fleets being lured into ambushes and accidentally destroyed. Smuggler ships tagged with human signatures getting vaporized mid-transit. No warning, no trial, no diplomacy. The Coalition wasn't fighting. They were cleansing. Not just humans, but anyone who stood beside us. Not war. Silencing. Piece by piece. They were trying to take the fight out of the fire, and they thought we'd scatter. That was their last mistake. We gathered at Gorgon Point, a half-destroyed mining asteroid deep inside the Null Drift, a sector so filled with spatial anomalies that not even the Coalition dared enter casually. There were hundreds of ships now, not all military, not all human, but all angry. The old broadcast had awakened something the galaxy hadn't felt in generations. Fear, and the desire to fight back. We weren't a rebellion anymore. We were an identity crisis with guns, and the universe didn't know how to fix it. Sharntak stood beside me on the old refueling platform, staring out at the ships blinking in and out of cloak fields. Salvaged, retrofitted, stolen, cobbled together from the bones of 100 wars. "They're ready," he said. I nodded. "But are we?" He looked at me, calm. "Does it matter?" No, it didn't. The plan was simple. Not because war is simple, but because humans don't trust complex plans when blood is guaranteed. We would strike 3 systems. 1. Krelian Station, the Coalition's forward operating base. 2. Zenthra, a communications relay world. 3. The Bastion, their strategic logistics hub. We wouldn't hold any of them. We wouldn't occupy. We would destroy the idea of control. At the same time, Earth's resistance cells, those who hadn't been crushed or silenced, would rise. Peacekeepers would be overwhelmed, local defense codes hijacked, outer colonies would block military channels. And into that chaos, we would drop the final message, the one we'd been writing in blood since the Threx first tried to make Earth disappear. You can't erase the fire, you only make it burn faster. On the eve of the assault, I walked through the hangar decks of the Fang. It wasn't the ship I started on. Hell, we'd cannibalized half of it just to keep the core stable. But it was still ours, still standing. Vorak was prepping the strike team. He'd named them the Nameless, a joke at first, after the Coalition wiped our records. But now it was a title, one that scared people. I nodded to him. He didn't salute, just handed me a blade. Honorics make ugly weapons, thick, heavy, no grace, but they don't break. That's what I needed. "Anyone scared?" I asked. "Everyone," he said. "Good," he smiled. "I heard you've got a speech," he said. I frowned. "Who told you that?" "Sharntak. Said you were writing it in your head every time you stared at the stars." I shook my head. "No speeches." "Why not?" I looked at him. "Because anyone who needs a speech this late shouldn't be here." He laughed. And that was enough. But when I stood before them, before the fighters, the rogue pilots, the exiles, the humans, the Honorics, the Kravari, even a few Tsali outcasts with glowing veins and whispering minds, I still had something to say. So I spoke, not a speech, just truth. They thought they could erase us. They tried diplomacy, then silence, then extermination. But here we are. I raised my hand. All those scars, all that blood. We didn't come this far for revenge. We came this far because we finally understood something. They never wanted us to sit up front. Not because we were unworthy, but because they knew what we'd become if we ever stood. I pointed to the fleet. This is what happens when humans stand. They roared, not in unison. Not military precision, just chaos, passion, humanity. We hit Krelian Station first, not to destroy it, to broadcast from it, the same way we did on Solaris. But this time we didn't speak. We just showed them the faces of their victims, miners, families, soldiers they disavowed. Then we showed the fleet, our fleet. Not CGI, not propaganda, reality. And behind it we played a single line of old Earth music. Low, melancholic, a piano note from a time before starships. The Coalition cut the feed in 17 seconds. But it was too late. Every back channel, every relay, every pirate frequency. The message spread. And they knew. We weren't terrorists. We weren't a rebellion. We were a species that refused to be put back in the cage. Zenthra fell with no blood. The relay staff surrendered the second we entered the building. One of them, a Coalition analyst, took off his badge and threw it into the dirt. Said his sister died when Earth went dark. Said he used to think humanity deserved its leash. Now, he just wanted to join the fight. We let him. Because redemption was part of the fire, too. The Bastion was different. They were ready. fully armed. No mercy. No doubt. We lost 20 ships in the first 10 minutes. The sky burned with our mistakes. I watched one pilot, young, barely older than the last war I fought, crash into the hangar bay and detonate his core before he could even scream. We pressed forward, not because we were stronger, but because we had no plan B. It took 6 hours. But when it ended, the bastion fell, and the coalition fell silent. Not officially, not on the news, but in the tone, the panic, the realization. They weren't fighting an insurgency anymore. They were fighting a new galactic order, and humanity wasn't just a part of it. We were shaping it, with scars, with death, with choice. In the command chamber of the bastion, I stood alone. Sharntak was wounded, plasma burn across the ribs. Vorak had gone to recover bodies. The Tsali had vanished. And I just stood there, looking out the window, at a galaxy that had tried to forget us, and now couldn't look away. A console blinked, another transmission, encrypted, ancient. The voice, the one from the dark world, the creators, the ones who made us, the ones who feared us. "It is done," the voice said. "You have passed the point of correction. Now you choose what kind of fire you become." The screen faded. No orders, no warnings, just freedom. And I realized. That was the final test. Not war, not resistance, leadership, and not just of a fleet, of a species. The galaxy would follow us now. Some would hate us, some would worship us, some would run, but none would ignore us, not anymore, not after this, not after what came next. There's a moment just before the final war begins when everything goes still. Not quiet, not peaceful, just still. As if the stars themselves hold their breath, waiting to see which name gets etched into the bones of history, and which one gets forgotten. We stood at that edge now. Not as survivors, not as rebels, but as the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The one they didn't see coming. The one they told to sit quietly in the back row while the grown civilizations handled things. And now? Now we were in the front seat. Hands on the wheel. Ready to drive this whole cursed galaxy straight into the storm. The Threx returned 3 days after we took the bastion. Not in fleets, in armadas. More than 1,000 ships. Dreadnoughts, carriers, reapers. Their flags stripped of insignia, their weapons hot before they even arrived. No message, no declaration, just coordinates, weapons, and intent. They weren't coming to end the rebellion. They were coming to end us, as a species, as a memory, as a threat to order. We saw the scans. Vorak's hands trembled as he read them. "This isn't retaliation," he said. "This is annihilation." Sharntak stood behind him, wounded but ready. Then they forgot how hard we are to erase. I nodded slowly. They remember. That's why they brought everything. The room went quiet, and I finally said what none of us wanted to say. "We can't beat them. Not head-on. Not in open space. Too many ships. Too much firepower. Even if we bled them dry, they'd reduce Earth to ash just to prove a point." "So what do we do?" Vorak asked. I looked at the map, at the coordinates, and then I looked at the shard in my hand. Black. Warm. Alive. "They want to end us with the old ways," I said. "Let's end this with ours." I sent one message, encrypted, ancient protocol, same binary the creators had used. It contained no words, just our story, from the pit fights to the Threx moon, from Drelkar's reach to Solaris, from Earth's fall to Earth's stand, from silence to fire. I sent it to the black coordinates beyond the drift, to the ones who made us, and waited. We prepared for war, but we waited. 1 day, 2, no reply, no sign, no shadow ships. The fleet spread out. Faces grew hard. Hope turned bitter, and then they came. Not in ships, not in formations, just presence. The stars bent, sensors failed, and one by one lights went out, until the Threx fleet, all 1,000 ships, were not alone anymore. And neither were we. They dropped in like ghosts. Black vessels with no seams, no engines, no windows. Ships that didn't fly. They existed. They filled the battlefield without a single shot fired. The air buzzed with a frequency only human bones could feel. The creators had come, and they didn't bring salvation. They brought a choice. The command deck flooded with noise, not sound, but thought, images, emotions, pressure. The voice wasn't in our heads this time. It was inside our blood. This is the consequence of freedom. This is the cost of adaptation. You burned. Now you burn others. I fell to my knees. Vorak screamed. Sharntak roared and clutched his head. But through the chaos, I spoke back. Not with words, with pain, the memory of loss, the fury of being erased, the pride of rebellion, the cold defiance of a species that never asked for power, only space, and the will to fight anyone who tried to steal it again. And then I said the only words I knew would matter. We are not your weapon. We are not your children. We are not your mistake. We are your equal. There was silence. Then the voice returned, but softer. Not power, not control, recognition. You are fire. And fire chooses, and just like that, they vanished. Every ship, every shadow, every presence. Gone. But not before they took something with them. The Threx, every ship, every war beast, every last remnant of the force that came to erase us. Gone. Not destroyed. Just removed. From time, from space, from existence, as if the creators had decided we'd earned the right to stay, and the Threx hadn't. The galaxy never recovered. Not from what it saw, not from what it felt. Thousands of systems watching live, hearing a war end without a weapon fired, seeing humanity speak back to the gods that made them, and not die. We didn't declare victory. We didn't build monuments. We just kept going. Because survival wasn't the goal anymore. It never had been. It was always about choice. And now we had it. The coalition fractured. Half of its member species seceded within months. The other half fell silent. Some begged to join our alliance. Others just stopped speaking entirely. Earth was restored. But we didn't rebuild the old way. No councils, no mandates, no back seat. Instead, we created the Seatless Accord, an alliance where no species sat at the head, where no one decided who spoke first, and we never again sat quietly when someone tried to talk over us. I never went back to Earth. I didn't need to. It was still there, still burning, still beautiful. I lived out my days aboard the Breach Fang, what was left of her. We rebuilt her as a museum once, then stripped it all down and made her fly again. Because that's what humans do. We fly, we fight, we break, and then we build something better from the wreckage. I still remember what the Creator said. You are fire, and fire chooses. And when I look back now, I know what we chose. We didn't choose destruction. We didn't choose power. We chose the thing they feared most. Freedom, the real kind. The kind that isn't given. The kind that's taken. Earned. Held with bloodied hands and broken hearts, and the memories of everything we had to lose just to exist. And I know this. When the galaxy tells the story of why humans never sat up front, they'll know the truth. We weren't late to the table. We were watching, measuring, learning, waiting. And when the fire finally reached the front, we didn't ask for a seat. We took the whole damn room.